Hi, everybody. Jim Ostrowski. I'm on trial in Syracuse Monday, so I had to go into lockdown mode. But a couple quick points. Protectionism is bullshit. It's a religion whose founder didn't rise from the dead, so I don't know why people are so attached to it. But I pretty much I have refuted all of the pro-tariff arguments, either on podcasts or in text posts. And I'm just getting tired of it. It's bullshit. So I'm just not going to talk about it anymore to people who believe in the religion of protectionism. But the other issue I wanted to talk about real quick, just because I'm walking down the street doing nothing else. So one of the things that the left's big issue really over the years has been, and you hear Bernie Sanders say this, there's a right to health care. So I'm gonna lay out an argument. It's not going to take very long. So one of my principles of political economy that I believe I developed myself. Don't think I stole it from anybody else. If I don't steal other people's ideas. I give them attribution if I do use their ideas. So before you advocate that government do X, can you prove that government can do X? So this is this like critical step that people leave out. I think the government should do this, that, and the other thing. And while you're at it, the government should do this. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, P, Q, R, S, T, U. No, wait. Before you get to the alphabet soup of the shit that you think government should do, you're missing a step, folks. You're missing a critical step. If I say, my Honda CR-V should take me to Indonesia, a sane person might say, Jim, a question for you. Does it float? If I say I'm going to take my Honda CR-V to the moon, you might ask me, hey, Jim, does your car fly? So similarly, before you say government should do X, Y, or Z, would you mind proving that it's capable of doing that? So, I love that line. That's great. That's called How to Win an Argument Without Even Trying. So, government, there's a right to health care. Oh, okay. So presumably the government's going to do that, right? Oh, okay. Yeah, the government's going to do it. Okay, well, two arguments. One, I'm just going to talk about like what a right is. And I admit there can be some gray area, but I think there's a general understanding of what the term right means. Like, I have the right to life, liberty, and property according to Jefferson and John Locke and the libertarians. I think I know what that means. And it's considered a negative right. In other words, I have the right to property if nobody steals my property. In other words, if nobody engages in a certain positive course of action. So, in theory, if everybody in the world does nothing, my right has been protected. Right? So it's possible for that right to exist. And it's a right that I control. In other words, they say, well, if I don't want you to steal my property, I say, don't steal that. Okay, fine. So I control it. I'm actually thinking out loud here because I've never really written this up. So it's possible to have the right protected. And it's possible for me to pretty much exercise complete control over the right, at least in theory. So my contention is If you take that concept of a right and apply it to healthcare, sorry, I'm walking on this stupid sidewalk, which I hate. I normally hate to do because it's so uneven. Shakes up the camera. If you take that sort of simple concept of the classical understanding of a right and apply it to healthcare, it doesn't make any sense. In other words, I have a right to health care. That means that the rest of the world is capable of acting consistently with that right, and I control the right. Well, first of all, it's really obvious, and this is kind of wins the argument in and of itself. It's really obvious that if you take Bernie Sanders or whatever the left's ideal fantasy vision of a right to health care, the individual doesn't control that right. It's the government that controls it. And apparently, this argument's been made a couple times. I haven't gotten this argument from anybody but me, but apparently it has been made a few times. I'm going to track down that stuff and give those people credit once I read their material. So that argument fails right there because, and you may say, well, I'm using right metaphorically, or it's not a perfect world. Okay, well, stop using the term right with all the prestige of classical liberal natural rights that built America and just use another fucking word. We should be able to get some health care from the government whenever they decide to. That's not a fucking right. You're lying. You're abusing language, and you're abusing reality. So the so-called right to health care, as advocated by the left, is not a right. First of all, because the individual cannot unilaterally demand the protection of that right. And in fact is completely dependent on some unelected bureaucrat or elected. It doesn't matter or not. The consumer is completely dependent on. Sorry, I got some traffic. A consumer is completely dependent on the discretion and whim of some government functionary that they do not control. I mean, let's just throw in a corollary assumption there. I can prove that easily. You can't control a bureaucrat. As an individual, it's ridiculous. So it's not a right. And it's also not a right in the sense that it can be. I think I may do a full podcast on this with the selfie stick. This is pretty interesting. It's also not a right in the sense that everybody in the world can comply with it, because what is that? Let's make a real obvious argument that. Sorry, I got some kids on the bike. Let's make a real obvious argument that in order to comply with that right, other people have to produce wealth and resources and labor. You're either conscripting doctors or you're conscripting taxpayers to pay for the doctor. So a lot of other people care. And like, if I'm being conscripted to pay, if I'm being conscripted to pay the money to pay a doctor for somebody else's health care, where's my right to have somebody conscripted to pay for my health care? I mean, it's, I'm not by definition, by mathematical formula. So it's silly on that ground. A couple other quick points, and I think what I'll do is, I'm not going to archive this, but I'll make some notes and do a formal podcast. This is a big issue. And then the other thing is, like, what is healthcare? There's no real scientific definition of that. This is hotly disputed. It's hotly disputed even in the medical profession. People argue amongst themselves all the time. And then if you go outside the medical profession and people who challenge the American medical system, which I do personally, I think it's deeply flawed. There's no actual firm definition of what healthcare is, and there's no firm scientific notion of how much healthcare you should have. So the whole concept of being able to coherently define what healthcare means in order to effectuate that right is total bullshit. And then the final argument I'm going to throw in is an argument I've made many times. Obviously, we're relying on government to make all these decisions on healthcare. And so this is the final sort of coup de grace. What competence does the government have in healthcare? I know people are going to say, oh, scoff at that. Oh, the government is certified and they're licensed and all this bullshit. But if you look at it very carefully, you will find that I'm correct, that there's no particular rational argument to believe that this centralized agency of coercion, whose skill set is primarily getting men with guns together, organized, conquering territory, making sure that the territory stays under the control of whatever authority controls these men, and taxing the shit out of everybody in that territory. Where in that basic undisputed skill set of government do you get the skill set needed to improve health or provide health services? I think all the evidence is to the contrary. In fact, you look at the United States, it's the most, everything's certified and ratified and regulated and run by the government, paid for by the government, or regulated by the government, and we have the least healthy, wealthy nation. So, bottom line is, I'll do another organized podcast on this, laying it out a little bit more clearly. The notion that there even is the possibility to exist of a right to health care is bullshit. In other words, before you say, well, we're going to have this right to health care, you have to prove that it's capable of existing. It's not. There's no such thing. It's metaphysically impossible. Bye-bye.